currency. You go on the streets and see a mixed bag of Korean speakers, some very sympathetic to it, helpful, and good listeners. No, I don't know what you're speaking to me. So there's, yeah, it's like depending on the speakers, there's this power dimension that right when you meet one person is
trying to figure each other out. I mean, linguistically, trying to see where I fit in. I'm having a lot of communication with people in Singapore right now because of the move, real estate agents and HR and teachers and so on. And every single one of them apologizes for their English. And then you read this glorious email, just like great, very British, huh? Very British. But this great email. But every single one of them automatically refers back to their language, and language and culture and identity are all the same. And they keep on pointing back to, I apologize for my substandard English. And in a very way, I mean, I'm a fluent English speaker, speaking English at home and so on, very fluent in it. But there is this perception that I'm also speaking continuously substandard English. Right. Justin Lau from Singapore saying, like, talking just like this, referring back to, I'm not this, I'm not this. Even though I'm using it, even though I'm in it, I am not in it. I think that's like this shared experience. And so for me, I think, the next step is, these are the populations I'm going to be working with. Now, how do I bring my belief that they're complete human beings? How do I bring that belief into?
So do you identify yourself as a critical culture kid? You do?
Live long and prosper.
Okay, so if we could bring it back to the group, unfortunately, we're running out of some time. Bring it back. Come back. So I heard some really interesting discussions. Let's share a little bit about what we were talking about. Anybody like to start?
One of the things that we discussed just now about the negative attitudes towards the non-native Englishes, we kind of discussed the job boards that we've been seeing where they have to have native speaker, native speaker, native speaker, and it's interesting what native speaker they want because it's very much inner circle, like I almost said Canada, UK, US, and Australia, and I was mentioning that I had come across a blog about an English teacher who's been struggling. She's from Malta, and the official language of Malta is English, but because she's not from one of those core countries, even that is having an effect on her. So it's very much like which native English is best, and just like the negative attitudes that we face as teachers and jobs, searching and stuff like that, and kind of.
So you're experiencing that on the periphery, looking at your peer teachers not getting the jobs.
Exactly.
In response to the, do you agree or disagree that it is essential to retain one's own cultural identity?
Yeah.
So, I was wondering if perhaps something like what we did in ICLT, like values clarification or other identity building exercises, would be useful for children to kind of create their own core that they could take with them as they go from culture to culture.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah.
We talked about the difference, using your word torn.
Yes.
From the culture. It's quite a different experience from willingly going to an international school and the impact that being torn has on your attitude toward the language you have to learn.
I focused on the first question. I identify so strongly since I am Argentine that I cannot even begin to think about losing that identity culturally or the language or anything, no matter where I live. I can't grasp the fact that people lose that. To me, it's difficult to understand how somebody would lose something like that. It's just really difficult. I can't wrap my head around it.
It is an experience though. I mean, there's millions and millions of TCKs, you know, that have that experience, as Ray was saying, like torn. You know, I think you're very fortunate. You're that step away from the encapsulated marginal. You know, you own your culture.
We were discussing that. I also told him that the question is always like, I have this perceived identity, but it's always challenging. When I go to a native country, when I don't speak that language, even in Mauritania, first, some people will be like, wow, you're fluent in English. I like it. When I come here, I'm like, what's that? See, so even sometimes you have this perceived identity. Yeah, I think I belong here. But actually, you are questioned. Here in the US, I'm not that fluent. Back in Mauritania, in terms of language, no, I speak. Back in Mauritania, I can't even have an elaborate joke about something, you know, because sometimes motivations in this, world, it's globalization. You just go there, English is very important. You go put a lot of effort in it. I remember 5 years ago, I was very fluent in Arabic in terms of writing. I was like, okay, I'll probably write a novel very soon, but I put a lot of effort in English. That now I can't even, I don't have that fluency. So sometimes it's not only about geography, it's about that crossover, that learn how to invest a lot of time in one language. And you no longer belong to your culture because your culture is developing. Your language is culture is like connected, it's like one.
So you're having that cultural liminal experience not as a child, but now as an adult, as you transition from one
Exactly. And
language
you feel
to
it
another.
whenever you transition to a, here in the US I feel it. I don't belong when I speak. Back in Mauritania, same thing when I speak Hassania or Arabic. So also this learning experience, I think it's also another dimension of it.
Thank you.
I was just thinking that this experience of a loss of cultural identity doesn't always have to relate to your homeland or your mother tongue cultural identity. So I spent a few years abroad when I was really young, and as I lose that language, even though it's not my home language or it's not my it's just a couple of years there, but as I lose that language down the line, I feel a real sense of cultural loss. Something that was a piece of my cultural identity, and as I move further away from it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so with the 1 minute left, so this is an exercise in raising some awareness about the fact that these are people that we're going to work with, possibly students that we'll be working with, and that this is an experience that many of them may have. And Janet Bennett talks about helping our students move from that experience of being torn from your mother tongue, torn from your passport country. How can we help ease them into owning and their identity, creating a self-identity? I know for myself at 37 years old, for the first time understanding like, I'm an in-betweener, or I'm a TCK, that gave me some ownership. And suddenly I could perceive myself and identify myself as a cultural being as opposed to constantly being on the outside looking in. So, thank you. Thank you, guys. Yeah,
I have a question.
please.
Kind of bouncing off of what Ruth said. Going forward, since you've identified as a third culture kid and wondering how we can kind of adapt children into international schools, have you seen any kind of thing with like culture shock? Because like we do that for study abroad students all the time, and reverse culture shock. Is there any kind of class in the international schools that identify with that?
It's interesting you bring that up because at my previous context and in some of the schools that I've been interviewing with, when we talk about, our school is 50, 60, 70% international, and I have experienced culture shock, and I think we all have some kind of transition shock when we relocate or in a different culture, different language. So when I bring it to their attention, do we have a class? Do we have a presentation? How do we help them? There's nothing. I think it's they perceive that, they're young, they'll get over it. Or, yes, it's difficult, but they'll get over it. Instead of trying to aid them and understanding when they go into that depression, or when they isolate, or when they only are with their linguistic cultural group, they isolate. but that's part of culture shock, you know? It's like the stages of depression, like it is part of culture shock. And I don't see the schools making an effort to help them along, except for just being a kind patient teacher. But I would be very interested in talking about creating a workshop that identifies it. You know, I always find if we like point at the feelings, if we name the feelings, they see having power over us. And if I'm a 14-year-old Chinese boy now in Southern California international school, or if I, you know, whatever the situation, and I'm torn from culture, I think if we can name it and point at it, like this is you're experiencing this and it's real, and you do get over it. And here's some steps how. I think it's powerful and it's worth like creating. And you know, maybe this is now our task. You know, we go in and we have an awareness about this, and we can now help our students through that.
Yeah.
Cool. Great, thank you guys. Sorry for taking my time.